Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sunday Sketch, and today I'm going to go over how to draw a Zora. I have been, that's another project I'm working on. We'll come back to that one. Let's do 1920 by 1080, oops, that's 1050, 1080, bam, fresh new canvas to work on. Now, in Breath of the Wild, I'm sorry, my sinuses are still clearing up a little bit. That's why I don't do the videos early in the morning anymore, because my allergies. And I don't want to be super gross in front of the camera for you guys. So, in any case, Breath of the Wild has this interesting aesthetic for the Zoras where they have this fish head, right? And of course, you know, the Zoras back in the day had back in Ocarina of Time had a fish head, and you know, all these things. But aside from that, they are also kind of enormous. So I think aesthetically they're very unique. And today, just because the Prince is so popular, I'm going to go over a little bit from both the Prince and Princess of the Zoras. So the first thing you, of course, want to do is find your reference, right? So we're going to look up image. Now I have been doing most of my videos based on the champions, but I feel like the Prince Sidon and I forget his sister's name, but I'll find it. I feel like Prince Sidon is a not only a unique Zora, but also a very popular one, if the internet is anything to go by. So I am going to be using, once again, my Clip Art Studio, sorry, I'm probably getting the name wrong. Clip Studio Paint Pro, and my Wacom tablet. Of course, the way I'm trying to do these videos, you should be able to follow along with Photoshop or Paint Tool Sci or whatever, because these are all principles that you can get a pen and a napkin if you want to and follow along, hopefully, if I'm doing these videos any justice. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab our Prince Sidon reference first, and then we'll move on to the Princess. So we're going to see if I can find as full body an image as possible. Of course, the King Dorphan, I think his name is like King Dolphin or something. Also a very unique character, very cool. But I don't think for our purposes that he's close enough to the other Zoras to actually work with. So here's our image of the Prince, and it's not the best, but it'll work. It's just probably just blown up from a screenshot and photoshopped and stuff. So we're gonna just blow that up, and I'm gonna do a little trick that is just Photoshop only, really. And I'm gonna take not Photoshop only, but just for if you're running a program that can do this, take all the black out of the image, and I gotta switch this to congruent. If I had Photoshop, I'd be able to switch this to like congruent and non-congruent and stuff like that, and I'd be able to pick out one color and I'd pick like everything from that color and remove it. Unfortunately, I'm not running Photoshop, so I'm just gonna have to do it by hand. Bam, take all that out. and it's not perfect, but it'll work. So we've got our prince. He's a little pixely still, but that's because we used a smaller image. But we can still get the important stuff, which is like proportions and anatomy and stuff like that, right? So like we've been doing before, I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of his shapes and kind of do a little bit of an analysis on him, right? So we're going to come over here and we're going to figure, okay, so clearly his pelvis is here, right? And his rib cage is up here, and his head is here. He's got some interesting shapes for the various body parts, and I'll go over that in a moment, but at least establishing these bits is very important. Okay, so we've established that he's got all these features, basically. And then we want to establish where the shoulder line is. Now, he's got these shoulder pads, so you kind of got to gauge under the shoulder pads, right? And he's got, let's bump the line weight on this up a little bit so you guys can see it. So I'm going to mark his shoulders about there, right? And then we're going to mark his, what is that called? It's iliac crest. I forget. Let me look it up. I think it's called the iliac crest. Yeah, it is. So the iliac crest is the part on the pelvis, and if you look at your own like hips, it's that bony part that kind of sticks out that you can feel really easily, just right at your hips. That's the iliac crest, and it's one of the what's called a bony landmark, or a bone landmark. And you have your collarbone is another one, and it's those bones that you can see through everything else, and it helps you really judge where bits and pieces are on the body. So I'm gonna mark his iliac crest right about here. Okay? Now this gives us a good look at how long his torso is, how long his pelvis is, all these important things, right? So I'm going to fade this out a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and get started on a Zora of my own. Now, of course, Prince Sidon has a hammerhead shark for a head, and not all Zoras do. Most of the generic Zoras have more of like a generic shark dolphin head or whatever, but Prince Sidon, to set him apart, they gave him this crazy awesome hammerhead shark head thing. So anyways, the proportions and everything are pretty much the same across all the Zoras, all the male Zoras except for the king. And Prince Sidon is taller than most male Zoras. Oh, and the old man Zoras too. They do look different, but we're doing the younger man Zoras. So we're gonna come in and we're gonna say that that's gonna be where our head is. That's gonna be where our rib cage is. We're gonna put the shoulders about there. We're gonna come down kind of this way and put the iliac crest mark there. Put in our what do you call it? Pelvis region. And let me bump up the line weight a little bit so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. But I'm putting in very few lines. See, and I'm just making some real basic shapes, right? And a circle for that, and a circle for that. Or, well, you can do like a wider oval, but you know, you get what I'm saying, right? Now, I like to attach the legs from kind of up where the iliac crest is, although technically the bone attaches um, like right underneath it, like right here, right? But I do like to, when I'm drawing a pose, because it's the landmark, I like to base a lot of things around it. And you also want to draw more or less from the outside of the leg rather than the inside, right? Um, because the bone is closer to the outside, and you get a better shape that way, I feel. So then we're going to put in our knees, and if we go back and we look at where the knee is placed on the prints, right? So we're going to look at this, and we're going to say the knee looks to be about here. And then the shin is there, and the foot is here. And we'll go into the foot in a little bit more detail in a second after we get our own guy mapped out, right? So very simple. I'm just doing line work, right? I'm just line, line, line. It's all just really simple basic lines. Then I'm going to put the knees in, and I've got about, it's actually a little too short. I'm going to kind of gauge, okay, if this red line that I made over here is this long, then my line should probably be, you know, about the same length. And then we put in the shins, which are slightly shorter. And then the feet will go about here, right? They've actually got really short legs in comparison to the rest of their body, and really long arms, which is interesting because I feel like not a lot of swimming creatures have short legs, but they use like their whole body. Anyways, it's very interesting. So if we've gauged that their shoulders are going to be about here, then we're also going to give him biceps. And again, if you watched any of my other videos, the elbow comes in about roughly at the bottom of your rib cage. Like if you measure it on yourself, it's going to come in about underneath your rib cage, just underneath your rib cage. So I kind of line it up to where I want the rib cage to be, where I want the rib cage to end. And if you look at on the prints, if you look at this shape, right, this will actually bring you all the way down to the bottom of the rib cage, and then it kind of comes up this way, right? So you have this shape in here. And so then if we look over here, here's the bottom of the rib cage, and there's his elbow. So that's basically how I gauge it. It makes it easier for me to remember, right? So we go to the bottom of the rib cage, and we put the elbow just underneath that. Although I did it a little low, so I'm actually going to raise my elbows up. And again, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I do it all the time. I make adjustments as I go. It's a completely normal part of this. Don't expect things to come out perfect every time. And then another part of measuring bodies and things is that the often, this is not true for everyone, but often the hands will also come to rest at about mid-thigh. So we see, I'll show you on the prints here again, after I undo a bunch of stuff that I drew on the wrong layer, because I want to keep my layers correct. So here's his hand, and then here's, you know, this is his thigh, right here. And so his hand ends about, or his hand comes in about mid-thigh, right? So, knowing that, we're going to go back to the correct layer, except I drew that stuff on the wrong layer again. That's all right. Okay, so knowing that, and I am on the correct layer this time. We are going to put in the elbows at about where the bottom of the rib cage, where we want that to be, and then we're going to put in the hands at about mid-thigh level. So as we can see, he's got some weirdly long arms, but he's a Zora. And really, the thing that makes it most peculiar with his arm length is that his legs are so short. If his legs were longer, I feel like the arm length wouldn't be an issue. But his legs are very short, which makes his torso and his arms look a lot longer, right? And then he's also got this very long, slender neck as well, which, you know, we put in there, right? So, we've got some basic shapes. We've got an understanding of the Zora's proportions and a little bit of their anatomy. So next we want to look at some of the detail work, right? Or more importantly, some of the other shapes that they bring into play, okay? So, if we're looking at the prince, okay, and just bear with me here, he's got the face shape is very relatively human face shape. He and many other Zoras have this kind of V shape in their heads, where their nose comes in, and then they got the eyes, right? And then their mouths, his mouth is going to be about there, and then he's got, like I said before, he's got a fairly slender neck. And he's got some kind of armor or markings, I forget which, but he's got a relatively slender neck. And then, of course, all the rest of this. Now, other Zoras are not going to have the same head shape that the prince has going on here, necessarily, because the prince has this hammerhead look that comes out here, right? But the Zoras all have that same part where their head, where basically where their nose would be. So when you're drawing your own Zora or drawing the prince, you definitely want to have at least this part of the face right here. You want to have his general head shape, and then you want to have that V kind of look, okay? And that's relatively easy, and we can find another Prince Sidon face reference, because they're fairly plentiful, because again, he's a very popular character. But we can take a look at, that classic, let's take a look at that classic grin that he does, and we're going to copy that image over to use in our reference. Right, and you can see here what I was talking about. Let me just line these up, right? So you can see here what I was talking about. He's got his face shape, which is fairly humanoid, right? And then he's got this bit. And that V, like, cuts into his face, and then he's got his eyes that are just, like, directly attached to it. And right under there is where your mouth is going to be. Practically right under there. And I just drew all over that one picture, so I'm actually going to undo all of those. I swear, if I didn't have Control Z, I would not survive. It helps so much. I'm going to make a new folder, put it under references. That way I stop drawing on my references. And and I'm just going to rearrange some layers, do a little bit of housekeeping. There we go. Okay, right? And then you can see he's got the collar and he's got all these things. So that's one shape that you got to be aware of, is the face shape, and then he's got that V that comes all the way down to where his nose would be on a normal person, right? The next shape that I think is important is the shape of his pelvis, because I think the shape of his pelvis is actually pretty almost bizarre, because he's got a very wide groin, which is usually, I feel like, more of a female thing. Males tend to have narrower hips and groin areas, but he's got a very wide one. He's got the Zoras in general seem to have very womanly hips, I feel. So, just to explain myself a little bit, you can see very easily on this reference that this is where his pelvis is. So you see that shape, it's like a wide V, right? There is the bone at the front of your pelvis where your pelvis meets, which would be right here. On him, I imagine it'd be very wide. Of course, I might be imagining things because he doesn't have exterior genitals that we can see, and so maybe that's messing with my perception of the space, but I do feel like he has wide hips, especially if you compare to the shoulders. You know, his hips basically come all the way out to where his arms attach, so like right here, you know, the hips are there. That's, I don't feel, as uncommon, but on cartoon characters they tend to have much broader shoulders for males than their hips. I don't know, maybe I'm just I'm trying to make sense of the anatomy here, and to me it feels like he's got wide hips, and I think maybe it's because his waistline is so narrow, like right in here, is so much narrower, and he gets this curve, and so maybe that's just distorting what I'm seeing of the hips. He's got a very broad chest, and then a very narrow waist, and then the wider hips. So maybe his hips aren't feminine necessarily, but they do come off that way to me, because possibly just because of that contrast. In any case, you want to be careful and kind of pay attention to that area as well, this shape in here, right? So I'm gonna go back to my guy. We'll draw that in black, right? I'm actually gonna fade out the base skeleton that I started with, as one does, and I'm gonna start putting in some of the details, or some of the, not details, but some of the shapes, right? Some more shapes. So the barrel chest, right? We're gonna go from where the arms attach, and we're just gonna do a nice rounded line, curve, not a line, but a curve, right? Do a nice curve. And so this is where his rib cage and his most of his torso is going to be, right? And then the his abdominal panel thing. I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. I've been doing that on a few of my other drawings, but where the where your abs go, right? And then we're gonna come out for the hips. So again, we get that nice curve in there. And this abdominal panel is really just, again, curved lines. You go all the way down to the groin. And because his groin is wider, you know, I gave it some space. And it's just like right down the center, just this panel. And it makes things easier to like attach to and stuff. And once you have your skeleton all set up anyway, it's going to be pretty easy to lay that out. Right, so that's what we got so far. Then his clavicle is, he actually has his chest raised quite a bit, so his clavicle is going to be like right, almost flat across the top. And then I'm going to add in some of those muscles right at the back of the neck. And then those are going to come up into the neck area, right? And so there you go. Then we don't get a good look at the actual shape of his shoulders because he's got the shoulder pads and the shoulder armor. But we can give him normal person shoulders. We can probably find another Zora reference if we check out some other images of other Zoras. And you know, we'll look at the shopkeeper because I think he's gonna have the best reference for us, because not all the Zoras, you don't get finding a screenshot of other Zoras who aren't in armor is kind of hard. But an interesting thing is if we look at the shopkeeper from the Zora's domain, and I'll bring the image in. He also has shoulder pads. I'm gonna drop that into our reference file. And look at that. Also has these shoulder pads that Prince Sidon seemed to have, and it looked like it was just armor. But it might not be. Because, it seems like it's all attached to and part of him. So it looks like that's just what their shoulders look like. So this is going to get weird. Because these are abnormally shaped shoulders, right? So when we try to duplicate them, that look, it's gonna look a little weird, but that's okay. And you can see he's got his chest raised and a very high rib cage and a very long torso, same as the guy I'm drawing here. Excuse me. So actually we can raise this up even more, this line, because they've got very, very high chests. So let me get on the correct layer. Very, very high chest, very high rib cage. We'll actually bring that up to be even higher than a normal human's, right? And then his pectoral muscles will be here and here. And then, so we draw in the pectoral muscles a little bit. And then we decide that the shoulder comes off about here. And then here's the weird part: is they got this, like, it almost looks like a scalloped thing. So the shoulders have this shape that it comes off here, and then it goes out, and then it actually is out further than the arm. And we'll do some detailing on that after we draw in the rest of the body shapes, right? So we're going to do the arms the same way I've been doing arms for a while now, which is to find where the pectoral muscle and the shoulder meet and kind of just come out from there. And while on a human, you've got a curve, and the shoulder like comes down into the rest of the arm. On the Zoras, you don't seem to have that because the shoulder is like out, which is a little confusing for how the arm is built. But we're gonna go ahead and pretend that it's built like a normal arm. So here, let me try and explain that. So on a normal arm, if I were drawing this like any other arm, I would bring this curve here, and I'd bring it down, and then it would go into the arm like that. Okay, then that's just kind of how the muscles work in that area generally. But Zoras have abnormal shoulders, so this line, we're actually going to bring this way out, and then we are going to pretend that it leads into the shoulder, just like any other bit of anatomy there, right? So we're just going to have this, we're still going to have this line here, but the shoulder is going to come way out, and so we're going to have kind of a weird, abnormally shaped shoulder, right? And then we have our elbow. And we're going to look at our guy, right? And he seems to have a pretty basic elbow. And elbow to wrist and forearm and everything. So we're going to come down here to where we want our wrist to be. And we're going to draw in. And it starts out narrow, right? You start narrow and then you widen towards the elbow. So we're going to go ahead and draw in that shape. Curve it there. You can do little ovals too, same as with anything else really, but you do want to make sure you narrow towards the wrist. And then he's got his hand, which I've gone over hand shapes a little bit before, but basically you can put a block in for the hand, and then you can use the knuckles to kind of guide where you want the fingers to go. So, like, there's a knuckle. We're going to put the thumb is actually going to be back here, and I usually do like a triangle shape for part of the thumb, but not all of it. And then that's just, there are better ways to draw hands, easier ways to draw hands probably. But I tend to be very simple with my hands, at least to begin with. And, it kind of looks like a hand. Hands are the worst to draw, ever. But you definitely use the knuckles to help guide you. And there we have our arm, right? Now, if we take a look, we go back to our reference, we take a look at Prince Sidon, right? And the Zoras have those fins on their arms. Let's see if our shopkeeper guy has that. We cannot see the shopkeeper guy's fin arms because Link is in the way. So what do? We find another reference. That's what we do. If you can't find a good example of something, find another reference. Just do it. So it looks as though, yeah, we're gonna bring in I was going to bring in a female Zora, but I think I'll just bring in a different picture of Sidon, one that's not zoomed in all the way like that. It's basically that same pose, but just a different picture. Copy image, paste, there we go. And you see here where his, I'll draw it in. I'll show you what I mean. So, oops. Let's go with this layer. We don't have anything on this layer. Let's make a new folder for these guide layers, basically. Make sure we don't get them mixed up with what we're actually drawing. Now, look here, right? We're going to break this down for you. So he's got his fist right here, and then again the thumb, right? So that's a really nice, easy, basic way to do a fist. He's got his wrist here. He's got his elbow here. We're gonna draw in this shape because that's kind of what that shape is. Then we're gonna come in and narrow into the forearm, and then just match it up to the elbow, right? So, because there is a muscle like right here. It's like, let's see. I guess it'd be, yeah, this kind of group right here. There's definitely a muscle right in through there, and mine's not great. I'm not like really super strong or anything, but anyways, it's just something that you can look at your own arm. You can look at other arms. There's definitely a muscle kind of in this area that just runs in here. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is, if we look at where the fin attaches, it looks to attach right here. Right in this spot. So if we figure that out on our own arm, right? You're looking at your arm, and he's got his elbow, and then further up, and it looks to follow the bone. If you follow your own bone here, right, and then slightly above the elbow, and that's where the, oops, let me not flip off the camera. That's where the fin would attach, is right here. So we're gonna go ahead and draw that in. Let's close that folder, let's make that turn invisible. So what we're looking at is what the, did I duplicate that layer? I think I did. Yeah, layer 6 copy. Okay, gotta take that out. So elbows here. We're gonna follow where the bone would go. We're gonna put the fin right about here, and those fins seem to follow gravity more or less, because if we look at our reference with Prince Sidon just standing here, the fin actually is flipped down, but then when he has that fist pump thing, the fin is still pointing down. So they seem to follow gravity. So we're gonna go ahead and put this fin in, and it's gonna follow gravity and come downward, and looks like it's gonna go. It can go as long or short as you want. Honestly, I think in this case, this would be a part where you could like really get in and customize, because Prince Sidon, he's got all these different colors, all these different shapes. But basically, what I'm gonna do is come in from the elbow, and I know the fin attaches slightly below the elbow, but it's really easy to just make a curve that comes straight off the elbow. And I'm gonna give my guy a little bit longer fins, right? And the fins aren't wide either, so really we're just drawing like a strip almost that just goes right there. And there you have it. So let me just draw in this part real quick. I've already explained how to do it on the other side, so we're just going to do kind of a quickie a quickie doo-doo-doo. Ooh, that arm is longer than the other one. Where did I go wrong? I put this hand up too high. That's where I went wrong, because his wrist is here. Hand. Let's say that's a thumb. Let's pretend that's a hand for a little bit. And then come across the pond, or across the body, and try and get this evened out a little bit. Come down here. Hand, some fingers, sure, why not? We'll pretend that looks like a hand for now. Draw in, oops. Draw in not quite as long a fin as what I just did. And there we go. All right. So we have a torso. We've decided where the pectoral muscles are, where the rib cage is, and they got the high rib cage, you know. We've done the arms. We've gone over shoulders. We've gone over a little bit of the head shape, and I think that's probably the important part next, because the legs are going to be pretty easy. And I will actually, let's do because they're easier, I'll go ahead and do the legs next after I grab my pen, because I dropped it. So the way I do legs, the way I've been doing legs, is we go, here's the knee, here's the iliac crest, right? So we're going to do a curve that comes out and goes into the knee, right? And then we take a curve from the knee to the groin, and we get this kind of nice leg shape. I think it works fairly well most of the time, using that strategy. Just doing curves from, see, because if you look, here's his groin, here's his iliac crest, here's his knee. We just do a curve from there, and there we go. We have, you know, the start of the thigh. So that's the strategy I've been using for legs, for the thighs anyway. And then, you know, you kind of pretend where his butt is and draw in, you know, you draw in more of the leg from there. You know, you can add on and do things like that. Now, interesting thing is that his legs, also the shin actually comes in, almost like we did with the Rito. The shin actually comes inward. So we look at him again, we look at the prince again, and his knee is here, his shin is like back here, and that doesn't happen all the time. On people, it depends on how you're standing. You can get a similar effect, but in fact, he's got these legs that kind of pull backwards, away from his, you know, beneath his knee, right? And so they're like back here, and then he has these like crazy dinosaur feet looking things, and I'll go over that too. So we're gonna go ahead and we put the calf muscle in, which is gonna be this circle, and we want to connect our shapes a little bit better. Then we draw this to the ankle, and you wanna get that nice calf muscle shape, which is similar to the forearm. You know, you go wider closer to the knee, and then narrower at the wrist or ankle. In this case, it's the ankle, right? And so there's his ankle right there. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to draw a line slightly back, kind of gauge where his shin would be. We're going to draw in the shape of the shin, and then we're going to go ahead like that, right? Now, the feet are a little tricky because they do seem to be webbed, and you have a very interesting shape here, right? So you've got this. Let me switch colors. You've got, oops, not you, this shape here, right? Like this looks like a regular toe, but then this shape is kind of crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically draw him like he has socks on. Okay, so we're going to draw a foot shape, but we're not going to put toes on it yet. So we're going to draw the back where the heel is, right? So this would be the heel. And then we're going to draw where the front of the foot would be. So that'd be about here. And we're going to kind of work those together until we have something that resembles a foot in a sock. So, kind of like that. I'm going to do kind of a quick and dirty version over here, just so we can keep things moving. Right, get some foreshortening in there, do what you gotta do. And then we're gonna come in and we're gonna like define some shapes in here. So he's got the big toe, right? And that kind of ends in this claw shape, and then this comes out and has like almost like all of the other toes are grouped together. And we're going to just draw that on top of the sock. And then we're going to remove some lines. And then that more or less looks like the same shape that we've got on the prints there. So I'm going to do it over here. But I've got the foot at a little bit of a different angle. So I'm just gonna kind of wing it. And again, you refine as you go. It'll get better the more you draw. Use your layers if you're using a program for this. If you're using pen and paper or pencil and paper, you want to draw lightly on your first, because you see how I faded out my first layer. If I went full, it'd look like this. It'd look kind of a mess. But you want to draw light enough so that you can draw over it. And then I'm gonna fade this layer out as well and draw over that as well. So it's all about using kind of a layered approach. Go from big generalizations and then build the details in. Right? The first layer was just the skeleton, and it was really generalized big shapes. Next layer is more about the muscle groups, and you get more detail. The next layer I add in is going to have even more muscle groups and even more detail. But we're not finished with this layer yet, because we're going to keep adding a few more bits in here. So we have our neck, and now we're going to add the head in, right? And so we're going to add this head shape. Going to give him a good jawline. And the head shape on a Zora is pretty close to a human's. But then, roughly where the nose would be, which is kinda, let's see, top of head, bottom of head, the nose is like here, so it's not quite halfway. The eyes are closer to the halfway mark on your head. So it's below the eyes, right? So you're not going to go halfway on the head. You're going to go below halfway. So we're going to have, and because they have eyes in a different place, it's harder to measure for that. But we're going to go about here, and we're going to draw in our V shape. Our very important V. And then I'm going to go back to my references, and I'm going to pick up the shopkeeper. Now, he actually has kind of this bottlenose dolphin thing going on. And I'll show you how they accomplish that. If you haven't played Breath of the Wild, or if you haven't gotten a good look at these characters, at least from the side, I'll show you the princess. And you can kind of see what I'm talking about, and you could see it on some of the Prince Sidon references that we got, but not all of them. Princess. What is her name? I forget her name. It's not Ruto, obviously. I want to say it's like Laruto or something, but that might be an area, because that does seem to be a thing. Her name is Mipha. That's right. I always forget about Princess Mipha because she's just, I don't know, kind of annoying. I think she's kind of annoying. I'm not about the waifu, you know. Like I liked, I really liked the Gerudo champion because she was like tough as nails, and but she still had that like soft nurturing side and everything. She was the full package, right? Mipha is kind of just whiny, but I'll show you what I mean, right? So let's not zoom in that much. On Mipha, you see where the nose would be. Let me drop that back down into the reference folder, pop it up, zoom out a little bit. I'll show you. Okay, here we go. So where the nose would be on the Zora, that's where the fish head like connects. Okay, so right here, right? So on an average person, you'd get your head shape about here. Her eyes are a little far back, but the Zoras have interesting eyes anyway. And then the nose would be here. Maybe the eyes aren't a little far back. They are down a little ways, though. She's got low eyes. I'd put, on a person, I'd put the eyes like here. So their eyes are lowered. But the nose, would go about here. And instead of that, they've got this crazy, like, where they attach the fish head to, basically. And that's where that V comes in, right in here. She's got the V too. It's just a little more subdued with her because of the shape of her fish head attachment. But so when we look at our shopkeeper reference, he's got the same thing going on, but because he's looking down, the big bulbous fish head part actually comes down with him, right? Now, you can customize this a little bit, look at references for different kinds of fish, and, attach your own fish head to it. Why not? Have some fun with it. But they all attach in the same place, which is at the nose, okay? That's the takeaway here. Whatever fish head you want to attach to it, hammerhead shark, bottlenose dolphin, whatever you want to do, put it on the nose, and then you build up a little V from there, and then fish head, and have fun. So Anyway, uh, there we go. We're gonna build this up. So we've got that V. We've got our eyes, which are gonna be, whoops, wrong color. Our eyes are gonna be right on that V. And then the fish head would go, you know, here, right? And it also is going to add some height. And then the fins that are going to come off of it are going to add some width to the shape of our head. And again, you know, the fins on the sides, that's another bit that you can customize it. You can make it your own. Now, the tricky part is going to be adding in the big fishtail on the back, because that's a completely different shape. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of take a line from here, come back here, and kind of add just a kind of a quick line to give you an idea that it's back there without having to actually draw the whole thing. It's kind of a cheapy way to do it, because I haven't like judged for depth. And when you're drawing your character, your Zora, whatever, from the side, you're gonna have to do different shapes for it. But this will get the idea across, right? So then I'm gonna fade that out, and I've only got a little bit of time left for today, so I'm gonna go ahead and go into more detail on some of the facial structure and the shoulders, because I think those are going to be the trickiest parts. Oh, and one thing I forgot from the reference is the hip fins. Let's look at... I should actually go over that first before I get too crazy with other stuff. We look at Prince Sidon. He's got these fins, and they come straight off the... almost like the thigh, really. And I don't think I've seen it on all Zoras. Some Zoras have them, some Zoras don't seem to, or they might be shorter. But the way I'm going to do it, and I'll show you the way I'm going to do it here, right, is we're going to go off that iliac crest again, which is this hip line here. And we're going to draw a much bigger fin shape, and it's going to come down over the thigh, and so we're going to end up with something like that. But I based it on the iliac, on where the iliac crest attaches, because I feel like that's where it would attach in real life, because it's you know, the bony landmark again, right? And there you go. So that's your hip fins. Now, if we look at them, they don't seem to have a tail. That, at least on Prince Sidon, this seems to go all the way around the back, because you see this part here is the same color as these hip fins. So it seems to be that the hip fins go all the way back, like some kind of a like tailcoats, on him at least. Now, not all Zoras seem to have this feature, the tailcoats. That seems to be a pretty unique design element to him, but I like them, so I'm going to keep them on mine. So we went over that. So now I'm going to go over the sort of scalloped look on the shoulders. Now, the shoulders, I gave you the weird, like, egg-shaped protrusion thing on the shoulders. What the shoulders do on Zoras is that they have a small fin that comes off the shoulder about here. And that's where you get that weird scalloped look. Now, it is still an oddly shaped shoulder, and I'm going to kind of improvise a little bit because this is my guy. but they all seem to have this same fin. Okay, so that's the trick. It's really not too tricky, but it does make their shoulders look odd. And I'll show you the shopkeep reference again, and you can see what I mean. So look here, right? Right here is where the shoulder is, and then right here he's got some kind of a fin thing. I'll show you on Sidon. He's got the same thing, and most of the females seem to as well. But I'll show you on Sidon. Oops. Well, here you can look at Mifa's shoulder. She's got that same fin, right? And another spot you can customize. You can make the fin look as elaborate as you want. Sidon, as we see here, has a fin here, and then his shoulder like scallops it. So he's actually got two fins on his shoulder. Let's see, Sidon here, you can see it. His shoulder comes out here. He's got a piece of armor here, which is different than the other Zoras, but that's fine. And then these two little fin scallop things, right? So that's what we want to do on our guy, is come in here, decide where we want our weird fin scallops, and then draw in the shoulder on top of that. Right? And then we come in with the what do you call them? Pectorals. And that fin will go right in to where their pectoral muscle attaches, I imagine. So give that a try. Then, of course, for the head, you got to make sure that you get the shapes right, because they've got that V, right, and then this is going to come up into their fish head section, which actually protrudes a little bit, so you want to make sure you try and get some of that foreshortening in there. And then the eyes. Now the eyes, as you saw with Sidon, they're very angular. Let's see if we can find a better... There we go. With Sidon, they're very angular, and they've got that kind of slit eye deal going on, like that, right? So their eyes have that kind of a pupil, and then they're very angular, and then they lead into the rest of the face, because they're just attached. Basically, the top line of, like, if we were to draw this guy from the side, and then this is where we add the shark head, and then the eye just attaches. The top line of the eye is the same as this part of the V, which also means that when they make expressions, that'll move, right? So that's kind of how their eye works. I think those are all the tips and tricks I have time for today. You can definitely, use this to draw your own Zoras, for sure. I had a lot of fun kind of breaking them down and analyzing them. I didn't get these even, but I'll fix that. Hopefully you guys can use this information to do your own drawings of Zoras, or do your own characters, or do some fan art, make some good stuff. It's been a lot of fun doing these characters, and next weekend, I don't have as much to cover. I can go back over some more Zora stuff, some more Goron stuff, some more Rito stuff if you want. Um, but Gerudo are not that difficult. I will be doing Gerudo next week, but they're not that much different than humans. Um, so I will break those down and we'll draw Gerudo next week. If you guys would like to see me do more character breakdowns and do more of these follow along how to draw things, feel free to leave a comment on this or any of my other videos, and we'll get this going. I had requests to do the champions. I'm doing the champions, some more detailed breakdowns. Um, and helping you guys draw your own kind of characters. And of course, you're gonna do it in your own style. You're gonna learn. Always draw from reference. That'll help you improve the most. And just practice, practice, practice. And don't expect it to be perfect the first time. This doesn't look great right now. This doesn't look exactly like a Zora, but I put in enough time and enough effort, and I will hopefully show you what the end result is soon. But yeah, you want me to draw more characters? I will be drawing more characters, and please, I'm always taking requests as to that. I will have more news and everything for you next weekend. Sorry. I do not have a Let's Play planned for this week because classes are starting up again. But I will definitely be back on Sunday with another Sunday sketch, if not sooner. But there will not be a Monday video. Well, at least not a Monday Let's Play. But I will be getting back to... I think I want to finish Half-Life 2. And I'll be getting back to that soon-ish. Once I get my schedule figured out again. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video and that this was helpful to you, and I will see you all next time.